You are listening to the Gritty Podcast, where we talk about all things gritty.
Oh my God, this is going to happen.
If I just let it go and I pull, it's going to land where it's supposed to go.
Why wouldn't it? I wonder if that's the real Joe Rogan.
His whole goal was to piss you off.
I don't teach shooting. I teach the conscious defiance of human nature.
Welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and I'm joined right now by Brad Hunt. Today's podcast is with our good friend Joel Turner from Shot IQ, Iron Mind Shooting.
He's a genius when it comes to shooting.
Yeah. So I was at the Western Hunting Summit, Brad and I both, up there with Ryan and Hillary Lampers, and one of the presenters was Joel. He was there for 3 days. We got to hang out with Joel a couple of weekends in a row. He's an expert, shooter. It doesn't matter the weapon. He's an excellent, not only is he proficient himself, but he's an excellent teacher as well. Yep. And on this podcast, we talk about how to be a better shooter, what makes you more accurate. We talk about controlled shots.
Yep. And controlling your mind is a lot of it. That's like the basis of his teachings, is learning how to control your mind to implement that into your trigger finger or whatever, not jerking the trigger, pulling the trigger.
A lot of people try to overcome their mind with mechanical tools. Yep. They put Band-Aids on things, but really it's all up here. And being able to understanding the concept behind shooting a controlled shot is it's a fascinating discovery when you finally figure it out and understand the concept and can then execute it. It'll put you back in control of your shot. And like I say in this show, this podcast, I watch guys that use controlled shooting. They are not the most steady. Their bow is just floating all over the place. Their hands are sometimes a little shaky, and yet that shot hits the kill zone almost every time. 10 out of 10.
Well, we were doing like freestanding and different position shooting at like 260 yards with the rifle. And I swear every time at 260 yards when I hit the target, the scope was not on the 8-inch plate, but it was fun.
You got to listen to this podcast, soak it in, check it out, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Before we jump into it, though, I want to remind you to go check out Stealthy Hunter. Go check out the rifle covers put out by Stealthy Hunter by Ryan Lampers. Check out the glassing pads, and also for nutritional supplements. If you are in need of krill oil, or you are in need of some probiotics for gut health, if you're in need of CBD oil, just check out Stealthy Nutrition. They got it all there. What else am I missing? E-Charge, which is an excellent hydration, electrolyte
CBD,
mix.
The roll-on, muscle
I've been
recovery.
using that muscle recovery a lot. The roll-on for the sore joints and sore muscles. There's just a whole slew of things over there. And then, as always, if you use the code GRITTY over at Mountain Ops, get yourself some Wake Me Up, Ignite, Yeti. I love those two products. I use those a lot. And also check out Graxaw game bags. If you like the game bags that we use, the big bright orange ones, they're about the size of a tin can. They compact so small. They'll pack out a deboned elk or a deboned deer, bear. They are amazingly tough. I have some of my original bags still. They're not very puncture resistant. They're good enough.
Right.
I mean, you just can't be stabbing them, but they're actual tensile strength, how much weight they can hold and how much you can stuff them and hang them up in trees. They're durable as all get out. And that's the trade-off, because they weigh nothing.
Yeah.
They weigh nothing and they take up no space. So check out our friend Austin over at Graxaw Game Bags. Get some game bags over there. And the links to all the partners that we work with are in the description field of every video we put out. So check out the description field. You'll find the link down there. And I think another thing that you might be looking for before the season starts is a dark energy battery pack. If you don't have a rechargeable battery pack like that, use the code GRITTY over there. They have an excellent product that I've been using since 2014, 15. Yep. Still have my originals. Still use them today. They are an excellent product. And then a product we don't sell, but I recommend everyone have at this point, is an Anchor PowerPort charger.
Yep.
That 3-panel Anchor PowerPort charger, last I checked, it was around $60.
Yeah, I think for the three panel, I think it's 75 or 79 for the 3-panel.
Okay, so inflation, folks.
Inflation.
Because I bought it for around 60.
Yeah, I bought it around 70, and now it's up to almost 80. So.
Yeah, so check that out. That product is an excellent tool for your arsenal, your backcountry arsenal. I can't believe how much that has changed the game for us. And finally, check out Sheep Feet. If you don't have any Sheep Feet insoles, you got to check those out, the Sheep Feet Orthotics. I've been using these for a few years now. They custom to your foot. They're amazing. They're worth every penny. You ought to check them out. And backpacks. If you haven't got an Initial Ascent backpack, I highly recommend those guys. Use the code GRITTY over there. We have an affiliate code with them too, and you're going to save, get a discount there. And I love their frames and how well they carry. So that's it. Hope you enjoy the show. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Stay gritty. All right, folks, welcome to the Gritty Podcast. I am your host, Brian Call, and today I'm joined by Joel Turner. Shot IQ, Iron Mind, hunting. Let's talk a little bit about, we're at the Western Hunting Summit here. Ryan Lamper's, Hillary Lamper's invention, their little hunting camp.
Yeah.
And you've presented last week and this week, and the week before on shooting and elk calling. Mm-hmm. I wanted to talk to you, as I don't really elk call very much.
Yeah.
That's like a thing of my past.
You're in the spot and stock camp
I'm in the spot,
now.
yeah. What I want to do, though, is pick your brain about shooting bows, shooting guns, pistols, all of it. Yep. Because you've got that you've got a lock on that. That's pretty phenomenal. And I will say that for me, it changed my whole life when it comes to shooting, all forms of shooting. We did a podcast, and it was a long time ago.
It was 2015.
Was it 2015? Yeah. Dude, that's so long ago.
I saw pictures from it the other day. I'm like, holy mackerel.
We did that podcast, and after I did that podcast, I got a text from Joe Rogan, and he's like, Brian, should I dig into this with Joel at all? And and I'm like, yeah, I think so. Yeah. And so then I know he kind of reached out a little bit. And
he took the online course. It was funny because I get an email when people get on it, right? Yeah. And I saw Joseph Rogan purchased Shot IQ. I'm like, I wonder if that's the real Joe Rogan. And sure enough, I emailed him, and he's on board with it for sure. Yeah,
he's all about these shooting instruction from all different areas, and different guys have different ways of explaining things that are similar concepts and so on. But let's help some people out today that are struggling with their shots, that are really discouraged. Mm-hmm. You're David Brinker types prior to figuring things out, right? Like the really sad cases. Yeah. When I first met you, I'm an open-minded, intense skeptic.
Yes, I knew you were going to say that, as we all should be, right?
So, when we got to your house, Lampers and I both went. Ironically, this is 2015. I didn't really know Ryan all that well. We kind of knew each other, but we ended up at your house at the same time.
Right.
What a coincidence, because we do so much more together. We went years without doing much together from 2015 and on, and then circled back. But at that time, we were out there and we were shooting with you at your house. And
that was actually the second time you've been with me, because the first time was at Brent's place.
That's right. With Scott Carr was with us.
Yep.
So Lampers, I remember sitting there, and Ryan pulls the bow, and up to that point, he hadn't really had any instruction from you. And he has a process.
Yeah.
And I can remember he had a release in his hand where he didn't know when it was going to go off. He had to just apply attention. Mm-hmm. And I remember he's like, this is awful. Why would anybody shoot like this? And I loved it. It was like freedom. Yeah. Why? What was going on there between the two of us?
So you have to base it on personality, because lampers, as many professional archers and really good bow hunters or rifle hunters, very calm personality, right? I am not of that super calm personality. That's what took me so long in my life. And you're not, I mean, you're a calm dude, but not lampers calm, right? Like I'm talking, I call them slow blinkers, right? Because, I mean, when you're talking to these folks, their movements are very smooth and slow. So Lampers never had an issue so much with target panic because he's a very determined person, obviously, right? Going so far in the mountains. But his ability to let go of the aim is the key, right? And I don't know where some folks get the knowledge from, but just the ability to know that you don't have control over it. That's the first liberating experience of your shot process. Being able to put the pin on it and then just watch it to keep it, because you don't have any control over it anyway. So that's where people really get hung up, where they're trying to control the aim. And anytime you put consciousness into the aim, you're going to punch the trigger.
What do you mean by consciousness into the aim?
Like if you try at all to keep it steady, or if you notice that you're not in the X, like your pin, if you're shooting a compound with sights, your pin should move so fast that you cannot comprehend it. So it's just a jittery movement that all you know is that no matter which way it moves, its next movement is always back to the center. But allowing that to do its thing is difficult for some personalities. But you'll find that the really calm people, even if they punch the trigger, their calmness, like Lampers was punching a trigger back then, and so he would hardly touch the trigger, but he's aiming and just letting that do its thing, and boop, a little bit, right? No big deal. But for his personality, no big deal, which means his calmness allows his pre-ignition movement that's linked to that trigger motor program to not deviate his point of impact very much. But if you get a nervous cat, right, you got somebody that's of a more jittery personality, all their movements are fast, everything they do is fast, they're trying to get that pin in the middle, and the anxiety builds, and bah, right? And their pre-ignition movement that's linked to the trigger motor program is so big that it moves their point of impact out of the acceptable range. So it's a real personality-based thing. Like there's a few professional archers that can still punch a trigger and stay at a very high level. But every now and again, it bites them in the butt. Yeah. So that's where I try to get all personalities to go just closed loop, full consciousness on the release movement instead of the aim, because no matter what personality you are, you don't have control over the aim anyways. So,
last week I was up here and Ryan Lampers has a 3D course, basically 20, 25 targets set up on these cliffs. It's a lot like a TAC event, and we're all going through and shooting these targets. And I was in a group with a fella, and we were shooting together. Terry, older gentleman. It was a couple weeks ago, and I observed that he's getting older, and at full draw, he's not the most steady. Just like I'm starting to shake a little bit more than I did 5 years ago. Yeah, right. Like your hands start to become less rock steady, and he comes to full draw, and there's a little bit of a wobble, just a little bit of a shake, and he goes through the process of just like, what you're saying, just a controlled release. And when the shot goes, it just goes. Right. Right. And I can see his bow. It's not super steady. Right. It's really not. It's kind of moving a lot more than you would think it should. Right. You see this with little kids too. Little kids put up and they're just like, but they have a release and they know like to just be surprised. They go through their process. They don't care that it's not perfect. Right. I'll be danged, man. If you just execute like that, it's in the vicinity every time. Yeah. So explain that.
So we're all born with a different level of visual proprioception, which means that's your mind's ability to gain feedback through your eyes. So again, if you simply put your pin on the target and watch it, it's going to move. But if you have trouble letting go of that, then you'll put more weight on your bow to slow the pin down, because you think if you aim better, you're going to be more accurate. But as soon as you do that, as soon as you slow that pin down, like if, let's say you're shooting a Vegas face, so you got that yellow bullseye, and that's that's when I have people shoot the most in my clinics, because it just freaks them out, man, because they see that pin floating in that yellow. So once they try to slow it down so much that they see they're in the 10 ring, and then they're in the 9. If your pin moves slow enough that you can comprehend that it's in the 9, you have just stopped your movement here.
When you say movement here, you're saying
movement in your release, whatever your shot
whatever the manipulation is to make the
for
shot
that
go.
particular release. Yes. So
you've interrupted the process.
Yeah. So as soon as you put consciousness into the aim, then you're gonna go open loop on the trigger, which means you're gonna punch the trigger. It can't possibly go where you want it to go. It can't do that, right? So only if you let that thing dance and work yourself through that trigger, when it breaks as a surprise, it's always returning to center. And you want to keep your bow light enough that it can come back to center quickly. As soon as you put a bunch of weight on it and slow it down,
it drifts off.
Very detrimental.
It's like, you're moving it back.
Then you try to physically put it back, and it's just that starts the mental mess.
I don't have a ton of weight, but I do have balance on the bow. You know, when I draw it, it just comes and lays where I want it to. But it gets around. You know, I've shot bows at the bow shop with some guys that are target guys, and their bow weighs
a ton
of bricks, like a ton.
Yep.
And you're straining. Your left bow arm is like dying under that.
Right,
load.
and it moves so slow. If you can comprehend where your pin is at, like here's the test that I do. I'll take a Vegas face. If your shot breaks in the 9, like your pin is in the 9 ring when it breaks, and it hits in a 9, then your bow is too heavy.
Oh.
Right? So you should be able to break the shot anywhere in the yellow, and it's still in the middle.
Yep.
So if it breaks in the 9 and it is a 9, then your bow is too heavy.
That's an interesting idea. It makes sense, though. You know, you mentioned this to me, I think, years ago, and it does make sense to me. When I'm driving down the road, I'm not perfectly always driving straight. Right. Like I'm always drifting to the right, and then I just move it back, and I'm left, and I'm constantly micro adjusting the wheel constantly the whole time I'm driving.
Yep.
Just to stay in the lines, and I don't have to tell myself, "Oh, you just went too far right. Yep. Now go left," and it just is automatic. You just correct.
That is visual proprioception. It's feedback, or you get visual feedback. Your vehicle's veering slightly to the left. You do an automatic corrective movement on the steering wheel until you get the right visual feedback.
I'm not even thinking about it.
Right.
I'm having a conversation over here, but I'm just staying in the lines.
Exactly how you should be aiming your bow. Put the pin on it. Step back from it. Watch it. You still have to watch it for it to stay in the middle, just like you would watch the road to stay your vehicle in the middle. But that's the only control you have over it.
Well, and nowadays, like I come to full draw and I put the pin on the target, and I'm not the most steady. You know, I mean, it's just floating. It's like, it's just right there, but I know it's there. And so I just start going through my process, get the job done. I just start doing my job, which is I just start pulling on the trigger just a little bit, and it's just floating, and it's there, and it's there. And I don't really care if it floats out to the back of the insert and then back into the mid. Like, I'm not really paying attention to that. I'm just pulling through.
Yeah. And
when the shot goes, it's generally in there.
Yeah, it's the rate of return. You do not want to slow the rate of return down so much that it, like I said, if it's in the back of the insert and it hits the back of the insert, your bow is probably too heavy. Let it come back, right? So that's a main thing. You know, in archery, the whole archery industry is built around target panic.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, right?
That was
different releases, different stabilizers.
Yeah, that was a concept that came from you a while back. I was like, once I started with a hinge, I got better for a while, right? Because if you don't understand the controlled shooting concept, then a release can be a great Band-Aid, like a hinge, because you don't have a choice. You don't even know how to make it match up and go. So, you know, when it's drifting on the target and you're doing your best to hold it there, and you're like, oh my God, if someone listening to this podcast or watching it, if you think of it this way, let's say Someone else controls when your release goes off. Mm-hmm. Someone else has a button that's going to make it go off. You get that bow back, you get on target pretty quick.
Yeah, right.
You're just like, and then you focus on just keeping it there, because someone else is going to make it go off. That sort of forced me to like learn to keep it on target, but also accept the fact that I can't keep it perfect.
Right.
The next part, though, was the next step, which was, like you said, you're stuck in the aiming room if that's all you do.
Right.
Like you're stuck in there just getting good at aiming.
Right.
Right. You're okay. It's floating. It's sitting there. It's drifting. It's bumping. It's in there, and it's okay. And then the shot goes by surprise with my release. Like, oh, wow, and it's there.
Right.
Over and over. I get really good at that. Mm-hmm. But then I start to know when it goes, like when the hinge goes, and then I start. My pin's there now, and I like time the jerk on the release.
Your mind will always push you toward efficiency. It doesn't make any intuitive sense for you to put your pin on and not shoot yet, right? It doesn't make any sense to put your pin on and then make a decision to do a movement that causes an explosion. It's completely unnatural, right? That's why I say I don't teach shooting. I teach the conscious defiance of human nature. I don't teach shooting. I teach you how to consciously override your own central nervous system in a shot. I just use shooting to do that, essentially, right? So when you first fix a mental problem with mechanical means by changing your release, your mind picks that up, understands it, and then just starts to make it more and more and more efficient.
Right.
It always wants to use the pin on the target as the stimulus for the shot. Mm-hmm. That's its default, right? And that's where most archers are. You watch a lot of the folks, they're either bringing their pin up real slow and then it stops and then they give it a little yip at the end, or they're bringing it down and they give it a little drop at the end. That's very efficient. Your subconscious just won that shot.
Right.
So now you aim, your aim is now pretty liberating, I would say, right? There's no thought of shooting an arrow until after you get your aim done.
Yeah, and it used to be with a hinge, it was liberating for a while.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I know I won't miss.
Sure.
Because it won't necessarily be a 12 ring or 10 ring, but I won't miss this kill zone. Like, because I just come back and there was so much freedom in the hinge, and it's just like, oh yeah, you hold and it breaks and it just goes, and there's no anxiety at all until I start to figure out the hinge, until I start pulling too hard, or I get fatigued and I need this shot to break. I need it to break. Where it really killed me was on a live animal, and I couldn't get it to go, and all this tightness in the shot, and I realized like I didn't really fix my problem permanent. Like I put a little workaround in place.
Yeah.
But really what it comes down to is no matter what release I'm using, there needs to be that process in place by which I actually, acquire the target, but just let it be, and then execute my controlled release, where I could stop if I want to or keep going.
Yeah.
But it's like the brain, my body wants me to stop.
Oh yeah, it does not want you to jump off that cliff.
Like
over and over
again. The pin is just floating around the kill zone, up around the heart, lungs, liver. It's floating. And here I am forcing myself to shoot the arrow. But the pin isn't where I want it constantly. Like it drifts away and then comes back and drifts away. And here I am telling myself to keep pulling anyway.
Yeah.
Keep pulling anyway, even though the pin isn't where it's supposed to be instantly at this moment. And it's so hard to override that, because it's like and you have to, it's almost, I tell my wife, I'm like, it's just an article of faith that if I just let it go and I pull through, it's going to land where it's supposed to go.
Why wouldn't it? Right. So, because you've completely eliminated any pre-ignition movements in that shot. But when you start to try to fix things, what you need to be doing is, the reason things go bad is because you stop making decisions. Like you switching your mind to this work on the hinge or a thumb button or an index finger trigger, whatever it may be, that never just happens. And that's the skill that I've, back when we first talked in 2015, I knew what it was, but I didn't realize how big of the fail point it was. People stop making decisions. Like you shoot a new release, you got this hinge, and it felt liberating because it was easy to evaluate that movement because it's longer, right? And it doesn't have a lot of tension involved in it. And you're just rolling your hand in that thing, or maybe you're pulling on it. But it's a long movement that you can evaluate. That's why a lot of archers settle on a hinge, because thumb buttons make them punchy or an index finger makes them punchy. Well, the only thing they did is they stopped making the decision to work it with control no matter what. And it's that leap of faith, conscious override, whatever you want to call it, that people think that, oh, I got it.
Yeah.
I've got it, right? And they stop making decisions. I always say the ones that you punched are the ones you never decided not to. Right? Yeah. You never made a decision. You just drew your bow back and started into this repetitive thing that didn't have any decisions involved with it.
Well, like you said, there's a course. There are decisions that you make along the way to execute
in one shot. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the decisions that I learned to make over the years was pick a spot, like pick an aiming point. I couldn't believe how it seems so natural, right? But like you said, making decisions. I didn't make that decision. I just put the pin up, and it was on the body. I didn't say I want it exactly, in this little pocket on the body in this position. I was like, just get it on there somewhere.
Sure.
And then I didn't really pin it there with the aiming. It was lazy.
Right.
And then once it was close, I punched it.
Right.
Tried to match it up and punch it.
So here's the thing. When people start actually making decisions in their shot, like your decision was to pick a spot, right? What that did is that gave you pause. So anytime you can create pause in your shot and fill that pause with consciousness, right? Like you used to, the aim was everything, and now, right? And therefore, you go open loop on the trigger. Pre-ignition movements are going to be linked to the trigger motor program. You're not going to hit where you think you're going to hit, especially in high-stress events like game animals. But you put this decision in to pick a spot. What did that do for you? Well, scientifically, it helped your visual proprioception because now you've got a very small, acute place for your pin to anchor to, and it didn't equal an explosion. The main thing is that you had other jobs to do, right? But that slight pause in consciousness, that reminded you, okay, that's as good as it's going to get.
Yep.
And then you were able to, because you had that consciousness, through that decision, I call it presence, right? Because that's what decisions do for us. You make a decision, it increases your presence, especially if you make a decision to do a very specific job, right? So that's the science of pick a spot. It may be before you shoot that shot, what I call the original decision. I'm shooting this shot with control no matter what. That gives us intense presence. Now we can draw our bow back. And autopilot has specific moments in your shot where it's trying to steal it from you, right? And we've all felt that when we got that big bull in front, like, oh my God, this is going to happen. Right. And people at that point, they just draw their bow back. Well, they have already just handed that shot to autopilot instead of going, no matter what. That will increase your presence. And then as you draw your bow back, the old autopilot tries to steal it from you again, right? So as you draw your bow, say something. It might be pick a spot or whatever it may be.
That's another thing that I think is underrated. You were talking about how language is linked to movement, right? Like you need to use words, not just think, not just draw and do this like shot process without any like words.
Yeah, you're just using words to give your movement rhythm and timing. You're using words to direct and trap concentration. Like before when you were explaining your shot, you said a certain phrase, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, or whatever you said. And you can go back on the camera and see what you said, but you said it multiple times and in a rhythm. So anytime our conscious mind is attempting concentration, we'll come up with a speech pattern, and we've heard people do it numerous times in stressful events. Oh, come on, come on, come on, come on, right? So it'll always come up with a speech pattern, neurolinguistic programming. So take that science and reverse it.
Right.
Use the words to put your mind where it's supposed to be, right? So the original decision, I'm shooting the shot with control no matter what. As you draw your bow back, say, I'm going to do this right, pick a spot, whatever it is.
Yep.
Don't let autopilot take it. And then once the aim is on, and then you've addressed the trigger, now comes the ultimate decision, right? How would you get yourself to jump off a cliff? How would you get yourself to do a movement that causes your body impact? That's exactly what you're doing in a rifle shot, a bow shot, whatever it may be. So that's where here I go comes in. So you've drawn back, you've got your aim, it means nothing, just let it do its thing. You've addressed the trigger, whatever that is for you. Then it's here I go. That increases your presence so that you can remember to talk yourself through the movement.
It's interesting how you use the phrase, people stop making decisions. They stop making decisions. Well, I relate to that when I see the animal, right, and it steps out. There's lots of things going through my mind, but when I come to full draw, I'm thinking, pick a spot, like a specific spot within the target. And then I tell myself, hold, just to hold it there, just to keep it, like you say, watch it to keep it, just to get it in that spot. And I can feel the pin like suck in, and I can see it just in that spot. That's my spot. That now I'm doing that thing, the holding part. And I tell myself to hold it, and I hold for a bit because I learned, this is another thing I learned from you years ago that's stuck with me ever since, is right when I want to shoot, I don't shoot.
Not time to shoot yet.
It's not time to shoot. That what I want to do and when it's time are not tied together.
Right.
And you had said to me, people generally they shoot 1 second before they really
within
should.
The critical second. Yep. The 1 second after they believe their aim is complete. They see the pin that they want on the side of that bull, bingo, that triggers the shot. If you do that, you're going open loop in it.
And when I started being able to go, nope, that now's not the shot. Then I found that my pin just stuck.
Yeah.
That little bit better.
Yep.
And then the shot.
Because it doesn't equal an explosion anymore. If your pin being on the target equals an explosion, it'll never let it just settle. It's like holding on to a grenade, pulling the pin and watching the thing explode. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to do all kinds of things. There's all kinds of pre-ignition movements that are linked to that trigger motor program, especially if you let the aim be the stimulus. So when you put your pin on the target, it's not time to shoot. It's time to decide. So let your aim trigger a decision, not a shot, right? And that's exactly what you're doing in your shot.
And what I found, especially the last couple of weeks as we've been shooting, and I've had a long break from shooting. The last year I've probably been at my least. I've killed more animals, but not because my shooting is dialed.
Right.
Just because I'm a better hunter than I was. But I find that when I'm at that full draw moment and I'm doing that hold, okay, and I'm resisting the urge to just shoot, right? Like I'm like, no. And I wait that little extra time in the aiming position. Then I've moved on to, like what you said, pull, and then that shot breaks. There is a difference. There's like a mental, like you said, they stop making decisions. I think a lot of people, and I was guilty of this just last week, hold, and trying to shoot.
You're waiting for it to go off.
Yeah. Instead of consciously moving to shoot. And then what it was causing was some breakdowns at the very last second of the shot.
Yeah.
And it was because I stopped making the decisions. Once I got to the hold, it's okay, get out of the aiming room and move on to the next thing. And it's like, I'm there. Now it's time to pull. And then it just goes. It's like, why can't I just hold and do the thing? Because that's a different activity than firing.
You're right. It will never just, you should never find yourself waiting for your release to go off. If you are waiting, you are not moving. And think about what you're thinking about during that. So you draw back and aim, you're like, oh man, that looks good. oh, I wish it would go off right now.
Yeah.
It's never going to go off at that moment because you're not doing any movement that makes it go off, right? So,
but with a hinge, I have tension and I'm pulling and it goes off.
Well, you think
but I
you
don't,
are.
But I'm not like telling myself as much. And
that particular shot is where a lot of people settle because they get to the point where, okay, I can aim and then I can pull. I mean, even if they're waiting for it to go off, there's still this internal pressure that's increasing and it goes off. However, that's the least accurate way there is to shoot a hinge. It's way more accurate to leave the hook of the hinge locked in space and you simply roll your hand around. That takes a decision to do that. And it's way more accurate than pulling. Pulling on a hinge is easier to control, but it's not as accurate. So
it pulls you off target, especially if you have a hard back wall or different.
It's just very difficult to keep consistent with that amount of input into the shot. So like there's no professional archer I know of that pulls on a hinge.
Yeah,
that shoots at an extremely high level, right? So it's just
when I first started doing it, I had a bow that had a squishy back wall, and I pulled through, and I shot really effectively. But the bow would give a little on that pull and then break, and I'd have this really nice feeling, shot process.
Sure.
Then I got a bow with a stiff back wall. And then I tried to do the same thing, and I kept just introducing all this muscle into the shot and into the bow that was just jerking me off or making me drop or collapsing on the shot, like all sorts of problems.
Yeah.
And I talked to Levi Morgan, and he's like, I did the same thing for a few years where bows were squishy in the back, and I could just pull on that thing, and it was great, and I just stretch it and go. He's like, then they just got stiff, and he's like, then I had to learn to hold right in between and shoot totally different than I used to.
Yeah. But
yet he's still able to shoot totally different style, but still be one of the best shooters in the world.
You should be able to control any release given to you, because why wouldn't you? Right? If you understand how to go closed loop, meaning slow enough you could stop it, and understanding the process that it takes to get into that control system, that closed loop control system, by talking yourself through it, by making decisions, right? So it's way more, people get too hung up on the words themselves, right? More important is the decision to say something, right? I don't care if you say words, a phrase, a hum. It doesn't matter as long as you decide to do it. Because if you're thinking in the future, like think about standing on the edge of that cliff. If you're thinking, I don't know if that water's deep enough, you will never do a movement that gets you to jump off that cliff, right?
Right.
So it's not until you bring yourself back and become intensely present. And the verbiage that's used a lot to get people off of cliffs is "here I go." So that's why we use it. And "here I go" takes 1 second to say. So it gets you through that critical second, makes you intensely present so that you can remember to concentrate right on that movement. So it's a very simple process. It's not easy, but like the process for a shot, for somebody that's just going into season here or whatever, and like if you're not able to take any classes from anybody, here's your shot. You draw back and aim, get that done, and just watch it to keep it. Then you put your finger on the trigger. Then you say, "here I go," and then you talk yourself through the movement. Your accuracy just skyrocketed, because even if you punch the trigger the littlest bit, which I don't recommend, but if you got to hunt that day and you want to fix yourself that day, this is the process. Draw back and aim. Then you put your finger on the trigger. Then you make a decision like, "here I go. Let's do this." Whatever would take you to get you to jump off of a cliff. And then you talk yourself through the movement. You just got exponentially better. Like when I do guided elk hunts, my clients will come in, most of them can't even put their pin on a target. They're all locked off target, punching triggers, and I'm just like, okay, this is what I need you to do.
So talk to me a little bit about, Brinker's a good friend of mine, good friend of yours.
Yeah.
Now, Dave, when we've hunted together the last 5 years, he brings a hinge with him, and he pretty much only hunts with a hinge nowadays. No triggers, no thumb buttons, no wrist rockets, none of that stuff. It's a hinge. And he struggled for years, and now he gets that hinge in there, and he just lets it go and float and shoots these great shots. And again, like I said before, like about Terry, it's not like I can see Brinker's bow moving all over the place. He doesn't care. And it goes and it hits, and he's so much happier than he used to be.
Yeah, right.
It's like empowering. We said this earlier. Like now he's like, I know I can hit that target. Now, he also is, I'm like, I have a thumb button when I'm hunting because I want to be able to just hold it and stick it. If the wind's ripping or the animals comes through and I stick that pin on there, I know it's sloppy. I know I'm forcing the shot, but sometimes that's what I need.
Sometimes that's what's required for that environment.
And so my question in regards to Dave, as he's doing that and he's got that hinge, he doesn't feel like he can get to the trigger situation. Like he said, look, Brian, if that animal stands up and it gives me the shot, while I'm pulling through on the hinge and the shot breaks, it's a dead deer. And I'm going to live with that, right? If it walks out of frame or doesn't give me the angle or it gets up and I didn't have enough time, then I didn't have enough time. That's okay with me. I don't care. I'm perfectly okay with letting the deer escape, get away, rather than try to hold and punch. I feel like I can hold and punch pretty good. In fact, that's probably why I have a bad habit.
So it's just what level of determination do you have, right? Like I was so engulfed in target panic when I was younger. I didn't have an option. It was try to hold 5 feet over the animal and then punch, right? It was a nightmare, right? So, but I had like the perfect storm for me because my determination, being a SWAT sniper, was so deep that I just knew I couldn't screw that up. But then I would keep screwing up in my bow hunting, and it scared the daylights out of me, right? And so that's where the perfect storm of me trying to figure this stuff out and going down these paths of research. Now, when I watched Brinker shoot the other day, you'll notice that the hinge that he shoots has a safety on it, right? So that safety is a big deal because it is the decision point. Because, he like many other archers, was so engulfed in the aim and unable to let go of that he would punch the trigger. Well, when I watched him shoot the other day, he had his compound out, and we both know he's very confident with that. But I noticed that he was starting to move that trigger a little fast, right? And so his mind is always pushing him toward efficiency. So I'm like, no. I'm like, show me how slow you can work that. So I got him to start making decisions again because he was relying on that safety to be his here I go. Yeah. So the shot in that particular true ball sweet spot release, draw back and aim, safety off, then here I go. Then you talk yourself through the roll of that. So always, whatever that moment is where you close the door on the aiming room, it always has to be followed by here I go. And then you talk yourself through it. And so we got him squared away in a hurry there on that stuff.
Yeah, I do find myself, I can get into a bad process of holding and punching on targets and shoot really well for a while.
And that's the ghost, right? So you got to be careful with that because if you punch the trigger in a situation where you didn't mean to, like people go, well, if I do this, it's going to take way too long. It doesn't take long to shoot a controlled shot as long as you practice the organization prior to the trigger movement.
You said this when we were up here in the wind. We had some fierce winds on this range.
It was crazy.
And the first day, the wind was catching pretty hard, and I'm trying to pull through, like you're like pull, and then I blow off target, and then I get back. So you have to stop your shot process when your bow moves 3 inches right, and just get it back on, and then start resuming. And you're hoping it will just break, before the wind hits you again. And there's all this pressure. And at some point, when some of these winds, I'm just like, stick it, punch it, and it's sloppy as all get out.
Oh yeah.
But I'm in the foam. Like I'm okay. It's not a shot I would take on an animal in those kind of winds. But you do 2 or 3 of those, and the next thing you know,
loves you for it.
You're just you're all messed up.
Yeah.
And I talked to you about that, and you said, make the conscious decision today as you get buffeted by the wind to still do a controlled shot. And if you hit it in the ass or the neck, or you, heaven forbid, you miss, so be it. Just know that you conquered a controlled shot in that situation.
In the most adverse of conditions, when you're having to go back and forth, in and out of the aiming room constantly, and you're just hoping it goes off. Well, it's never going off through hope. Right? You have to be moving. You got to be feeling that increase in pressure in whatever trigger system you're doing. Use the wind, use the stress, it's funny when I stand up in these clinics and shoot with people or just stand next to them, they shake, man. People get very nervous and some of them have body tremors and they just shake. I'm like, you got to learn to use it. Use it to go, no, F you, Turner.
Yeah.
Watch this, right? That's why I talk about the F you, Turner factor. Because at the start of the clinic, I can destroy you very easily, right? I can say things, I can trap your conscious mind in certain places, and you're going to punch a trigger. By the end of the clinic, just an hour later, you're using everything. I'm tapping you on the head with an arrow, doing all kinds of craziness to you, and it makes you stronger because you've got that little, watch this, sucker, right?
Yeah. Well, in doing that in the wind on the last weekend, I was like, I just was determined that every single shot would be controlled no matter what. And there were a lot of times I was at full draw a long time.
Yeah.
A long time. And then I'm like, okay, I got to let her down. On that wolf especially. Got it back. Same thing for a long time, but I'm like, it's going to go, and I'm pulling through. I am pulling like I'm supposed to. I'm holding and I'm pulling, and then I get knocked off target, and I put it back, start over, resume that process, knocked off target, and like you said, you're in this aiming room, and then over here, and back and forth, and then finally the shot would go. It was controlled, and there were many times it was in the lungs or in the heart area, and then there were a couple of those shots that were back in the guts. But all in all, it was actually just fine.
Right.
I got blown left or right, depending on the gusts, too far in one direction.
But like you said, you would not have taken that shot on a real animal anyways. So we're using that shot
to practice.
We're using it to practice concentration. You're using it to go back in the aiming room and fix the problem, and then getting yourself back out with here I go. That's the skill. That is the skill.
So another thing that I struggled with and even now is when I get intense levels of adrenaline, like I can barely, my hands are shaking.
Sure, mine too.
Like bad. And you draw your bow, you can't even get the release on the string. You feel like just awful. Get it on, you pull it back, and I am shaking so bad, I can't even do this whole controlled thing. I'm trying to put it on the animal, trying to hold it, and I am everywhere. Now, that doesn't happen every time. In fact, it usually doesn't. But for some reason, in some situations, on some days, it's like my body betrays me, gives me a jolt of adrenaline that I didn't want, that I now have for whatever reason. And now I'm dealing with that and trying to shoot. And I have found, like, in some of those situations that I am guilty of getting there and then just sticking it on the animal and just for 1 or 2 seconds and then ripping it and making shots on animals that I don't know that I would make without doing that. Not sure. It's hard to recreate that kind of adrenaline in a non-hunting situation.
Right. It's impossible to create that. So, but when you analyze it, because you experience that, you analyze that, you never made a decision to shoot with control. And not that that's a bad thing. Like if you decided to actually, punch this one, that should be now a choice. It shouldn't be the default. The default should now be closed loop, right? Slow enough you can stop it. You're never going to forget how to punch a trigger.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there are certain situations where punching a trigger is the most accurate option. If the critter's moving, you have to go open loop on the trigger.
If it's a giant elk and it's 30 yards away, I've done the sprint, run, 30 burpees, pull the gun, bow up, and punch. And in a target this big, I'm kind of always there. I'm fairly confident that even a sloppy punched shot in that situation, on a smaller target, no way. I'm doomed.
You have to be able to recognize your environments, and I want people to think that if the critter is stationary, it's closed loop. It's slow enough trigger movement, you could stop it anywhere within it, because every fiber of your being is going to be saying, just shoot it. Just shoot it, right? You're going to get it. Just shoot it, right? And that's okay for most people. It wasn't okay for me, right? That's why I became such a shot control freak, because it just scared the daylights out of me that I was going to do that in a lethal force situation. So that's where I come from, and a lot of people don't have that as their determination. Well, that's what I try to get them. That's where I try to get people to. But ultimately, I want you to not have to make decisions, because I don't have to stand up on a line and go, I'm shooting the shot with control no matter what, because that is a principle by which I live. I have shot so many uncontrolled shots on critters throughout my life. After December 14th, 2014, that was my turning point day when I really started to figure out that it was the decisions that made the differences in my shots being controlled or uncontrolled. But I want you to get to the point where it's not even an option, right? I'm shooting the shot with control no matter what. And then there is nobody in my aiming room. I don't have to talk to anybody in there. I just stroll right on through like a boss.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where I want people to get. And if you don't have enough determination to get there, then you best keep making some decisions, right? So like when that bull turns broadside, I remember that big bull in 2019 that I shot. It's 10 yards away. Broadside. I'm at full draw with my stick bow. I'm looking down the shaft of that arrow at the exact spot that the arrow is pointed towards. It's going in there. All I got to do is let it go. Simple, right? I remember in the middle of that shot going, nah, I ain't going out like that. Because if I shoot a critter with an uncontrolled shot, they don't go in the house. They go in the shed. And I wanted that bull in my house, right? So I remember saying, nope, I'm not doing that. And I remember then talking myself through my shot. And it was such an incredible feeling to shoot a critter that, for me, like I could have just, if I'd have let go, I'd have hit it in the lungs.
Yeah.
But I hit that thing in the hair that I was pointing at. And it just means so much to me. And I want people to get to the point where you don't have to make a decision, where it's a no-brainer. Like when Bodie's shooting a tournament, he's not going open loop on a trigger, right? He's not going. He's not going there. And that's why he shoots at such a high level, and that's how he wins these big shoot-offs and stuff, because you watch people just maybe aren't as determined, stop making decisions, whatever. If they need a decision to actually run that release slow enough they could stop it, as soon as they stop making that decision, that's when old Bodie Turner's going to come in and get you.
Yeah, I've seen that. I feel like, this whole archery game can really be frustrating for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
And they spend all year getting their gear dialed, all these things, but their shot, they really, they just go out and they just do rounds.
Right.
They just do repetition.
Literally practicing their own failure for a high-stress shooting event.
And there's a totally different, it's an utterly different feeling when it's that controlled shot than when it's not. And one of the things that I still am blown away by, you can have all these kids out there. They're not strong. They don't have this steady, their bow is doing this. You see some girls out there, their bow, I'm like, you look at you look at Bodie, it's like a statue. And he's pulling, and the shot goes, and just bullseye, right? But he pulls that bow back, and it's like in a hooter shooter. Like that thing is locked.
Yeah.
Then you see the girls and or some of the kids that are newer to archery, and they get that bow back, and it's like this. It's like it's all over the place, and it's just shaking all over the target, and they're just like, "What do I do next?" You're like, "Just get ready and just hold it right there, and then you just pull that trigger real slow, and kung, and they're in the kill zone, in the kill zone." And they don't know when it's going to go off. Right. They're just kind of putting the pin there and like, What do I do?
Yeah.
And you watch, like I said, some of these guys that don't have this rock steady hold,
Yeah.
And you realize over time that it's not about a rock steady hold. It's about a controlled shot.
You don't shoot better by aiming better. We're all born with a certain level of visual proprioception. I'm pretty steady. Bodie's pretty steady. There's things like a mantis that can gauge that now. It gauges exactly what your hold is, and it gives you a score and all these things. But it's not actually something you can fix. It's something you can certainly make worse through physical weight on the bow. But the skill is not in the aim itself. The skill is in how well can you let go of it. Right?
It's such a foreign, backwards idea.
Yeah.
Compared to everything else you do in life.
With my shot, with Bodie's shot, we do not fight science. We're not fighting the science of visual proprioception. We let that thing dance. We're not fighting the science of open and closed loop control systems because we know exactly how to put our mind where it needs to be. Yeah. That's the skill, right? And people practice the physicality of shooting. They need to practice the mentality. They need to practice, where do you find your determination from, right? Is it that buck that you missed last year? Is it some adversity you went through in your life? Whatever it may be. Find it and know where to find it. Know where your determination well is and how deep is it. And you should be constantly digging that sucker out, right? Making it deeper and deeper and deeper. And then what decisions are you making, right? Do you step up the line and say, I'm shooting this shot with control no matter what? And you got to believe that. And you got to know exactly how it's going to go. You know what you should be thinking. You know what you should be saying after here I go. You know you're moving slow enough that you could stop it anywhere within it. And again, you know exactly what decisions you need to make. So when you shoot that controlled shot, it's about blueprinting it, understanding exactly how you did it. And that's what took me years to figure out. Because I shot a couple of controlled shots throughout the years, but I never blueprinted how I did it. So they were a mystery. So when most people step up to the line, it's a mystery on how the shot's going to go. It can't be a mystery. You got to know what you're going to think, what you're going to say, that you could stop it, and what decisions you're going to make. And that's the powerful stuff, right?
One of the things that surprised me was, shooting 20, 30, 40 yards, and then 70, 80. What I started to realize was my groups were generally similar. I thought the closer you are to the target, the tighter the groups, and that's true to a degree. But I also found over the years, as I do a controlled shoot, that I have a certain amount of movement that's just inherent in my hold. It's what it is. Like you were saying earlier, I just do it. And as I pull through that shot, as I make that release go off, it's generally in that space. And it's the same whether I'm at 40 yards or 70 yards. It's like when it drifts left and starts to come back to center, it's that margin of my drift is kind of about the same.
You've completely eliminated the pre-ignition movement from your release motor program. So it's a surprise break. Your body doesn't know when to put the pre-ignition movement, the bracing movements. It doesn't know when to put it in there. So people's groups that, if you punch the trigger, are going to get exponentially bigger as you go out because you don't know which pre-ignition movement's coming. It might be grabbing your bow. It might be a micro collapse in your back. It might be wincing your face. You don't know what's coming because it's a mystery to you, right? And your subconscious is like, don't worry about it, Brian. We'll take care of this for you, right? And it's every time you punch a trigger, it's a win for your subconscious. But you know deep down that consciously you punched the trigger on that one. So just completely reverse that, man. I mean,
we're in that Brian Barney shoot last week, to beat Brian up there on the mountain. And you start at whatever it was, like
40,
50, 60, 70, 80. So I got back, I ran out of pins at 75 because I got this bow I was using in Arizona. And so at 75, I'm done with the pins. So I got to do a little stacking to get to the 80, And I just stood on the line, man, at all the ranges with all the rest of the dudes there, and I just held it and let it float, did a controlled shot, didn't stress about it, and just hit the center. 40, 50, 60, 70. I go back to 80, and I don't have a pin for it. So I'm like, okay, I'll put my my 60. I'll put my 70 up here on the aim so much higher because I think there's this kind of gap. And I'm getting there. It's taking me a while as I'm at full draw to like kind of figure it out. And it's hard for me to pinpoint a spot of where exactly I want it. And I get there, and then I'm like, okay, is that done? I'm holding, and I just punched it.
Oh, you got in the aiming room.
I just
couldn't get out.
Punched it.
Yeah.
And I didn't hit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All I have to do, even though I didn't have a pin for that spot, I know that 75-yard pin at the top of that thing is going to put me in the ballpark.
Right.
It's going to put me in the general area. It's my best chance at being in the ballpark, right? But instead, I punched it, and I'm like 2 feet low and to the right.
Yeah.
It's like not even in the room.
Yeah.
It's not even close. And it's like all I had to do was the simple thing of just controlled shot.
Making a decision. And you just never got out of the aiming room, right? It was technical, and you stayed in there, and you let your subconscious go, we'll take care of the rest of it for you, right? And it'll punch it every time.
And it's maddening because there was no excuse for it. It didn't need to happen that way. Like I just broke down at the last second.
So if you analyze that particular shot, and I know we got to go here pretty soon, but if you analyze that particular shot, you go, okay, it's 80. I've got pins of 75. So you're thinking about your aim before you ever drew your bow back, and there was never, I'm shooting this shot with control no matter what. You stayed in the aiming room
because I was so focused on where to put my pin
you started,
and all that
right?
kind of
so
stuff.
So you never upped your presence enough. So
to make the shot,
it's always get your aim done, whatever that is for you. If you're on a side hill, bubbling in, and all the technicalities of that one shot and that one aim, get all that stuff done. Then you got to step back from it, man, and you got to make a decision to do that. Here I go, right? Here I go. Locks the door to that aiming room and opens the door to the concentration room with presence.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man.
Yeah, I felt like, I finally feel like I'm I felt for quite a few years now, like I understand what to do now and how to do it. It's really just a process of executing. And my success has followed suit with the shooting.
Yeah.
I can go to a total archery challenge event and shoot every target and not lose an arrow.
Yeah.
I may not get, the highest score, but man, if you just let it go and do that controlled shot, you're in there close.
Yeah. I mean, when you shoot those long ones, long bombs, angles, all kinds of stuff, just know your equipment, figure out what your aim needs to be, and step away from it. Once you've got it done, here I go. It's very liberating to just step away from that aim, watch it to keep it, and then talk yourself through that shot.
Where can people find your instruction, Joel?
It's shotiq.com is my website. All my online courses on there. I've got a archery course on there where you've got compound with every different release, and you've got the traditional track all in the same course. I've got a precision pistol course where you learn about how to do close, fast work and precision work. It's called the Precision Pistol Course. And then I just filmed my rifle course last week, so that's going to be coming out around the 4th of July. So shotiq.com, and then I'm all over Instagram and Facebook and all that stuff as well.
What about one-on-one training? What kind of options are there?
Yeah, so I do clinics all over the country, usually by request, like a shop will request it or somebody will. It doesn't necessarily have to be a shop or just somebody with a place to shoot. There's a minimum of folks that we'd like to see there, and those are very powerful. So if somebody doesn't have quite the determination to do the online stuff or whatever, then I'll be right there with you.
Has anyone made an FU Joel Turner t-shirt or anything, a hat?
No FU Turner. A fella bought futurner.com, and he was at one of my clinics, and so that was good. Yeah. So I guess there's a website there now. I haven't been there, but I guess
in the industry, there's a few people that I've heard called an effer. Yeah. You're like right up there. You're like right up there in a good
way, though, right? The FU Turner factor is just, I got to get you determined enough to get control of your shot.
Sometimes that rubs people the wrong way. But
I usually try to preface it with.
But I also believe that I heard Dave Ramsey years ago on Total Money Makeover and Financial Peace University. And his whole goal was to piss you off because he knew that when you inserted emotion into the learning process, that it fired you up to actually take action and fight back.
If you don't have enough determination, you will be stuck in the gray area of shot control. You got to dig deep.
And us guys, we have some dignity, some ego, some pride. And so when you're over there making fun of us for doing it wrong, I mean, it'll piss some people off.
But it's with purpose, right? And I usually preface it with that so we don't get too many fist fights.
There's a few defensive guys, though, that have mastered the that are pretty good, I should say, like the Tim Gillinghams or the a mutual friend of ours from the past, a Lampers, where they kind of, they're a little different in that regard. But I will say this about people who punch it, like guys that hold and punch the punchers. They are just on, like sometimes. The tightest groups, just in over and over and over again.
Sometimes.
Then they are just off by 3 feet, like just a major whiff.
Yeah.
When I see guys that do controlled shooting, they may not hit the ring where they wanted to, but they're always on the foam or the paper.
Sure.
Like they're in a respectable range.
Sure.
I rarely see that kind of shooter just completely miss.
Right.
It just drifts. But the punchers, they can really miss bad. So they're either in it or they're not there at all.
Yeah. Yep. It just depends on your level of determination.
I'm like, I'm going to stick to the...
It's hard for somebody to change. If they're getting extreme accuracy with punching, that's cool. But don't try to teach that to somebody else that doesn't have the same personality, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I try to level the playing field and just, this is how your mind works. I just make sure that's for everybody.
Yeah,
right?
Lampers told me, he was sitting there, you walked away, and he's like, why would anybody want to shoot like this? Why would anybody want to be surprised when the shot goes?
Right.
Like, that's,
that's the typical answer.
But he's winning trained to hunt, and he's stacking them in there in the kills and all that, with the occasional flyer, like everybody. But I think, and I'm not sure where Ryan's at today in terms of, but back then,
so he can, if I make him, he can work that trigger like a boss. I'm like, come on, Lampers, right? Because he's running this thing. He's got to set an example, right? So,
well, he's really good at both,
is. Just about everything.
Honestly,
yeah.
All right, folks, check out Joel Turner. Thanks for coming on the show, man. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. Leave us a comment below if you got more questions. If you want to have Joel on the podcast again, let me know, and we need to do this more often.
Yeah, for sure. Been too long.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stay gritty, friends.
Take care.